Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to be making New York strips with a country fried potato, sauteed mushroom and herby butter, and then we're going to pop our sourdough in the oven that we've had bulk proofing for the last day and a half or so. And then we'll also start our new loaf of sourdough. So I'm going to flip it out on my parchment paper here. Go. Beautiful. And now I'm going to score it. I'm going to give it a big score across the middle. This is going to cause it to really pop when I cook it. And then I'm going to try to see if I can do a heart. No promises here. Very interesting hearts. But for Valentine's, I'll do one more heart here. It's more about the flavor. So we'll see if those 4 hearts turn out. Okay, I have my Dutch oven preheated to 500 degrees, so let me take off the lid. It's gonna be very hot. And then we'll pop it right back in the oven. I popped it in there about an hour ago. You wanna have your Dutch oven really heat up, nice and warm. And we'll pop it in here. Perfect. Now we're gonna put the lid back on and we're gonna pop it in our oven and we're gonna bake it for about 20 minutes at 500 degrees. And then we will take the lid off and bake it another 20 minutes or so until we've got the nice color, golden color that we want. The Dutch oven helps keep the moisture in on our bread. Pop it in there, 500 degrees. And I'm gonna set my timer so I don't forget to take off the lid. There we go. And now we're gonna work on dinner. Put these right here. Okay, let's start with our potatoes.
So you got a question real quick. What did you just put in the oven?
We put in our sourdough loaf in the oven. So we have it cooking at 500 degrees with the lid on for 20 minutes. And then we will take it out, or take the lid off and cook it another 20 minutes or so.
It was the one you prepped yesterday?
So, no, 2 days ago. So you, it takes about like 2 days to make it, but you can last it till 3. It can bulk proof in the refrigerator for up to 48 hours. So we cooked one 2 nights ago and I started that loaf. And so it's been in the fridge for about, I want to say 30 or so hours. But it's nice. I always like to keep a loaf going. So in a little bit, we'll prep our next loaf, which I can bake in like 2 days, or I could technically bake tomorrow night if I wanted to. But I like to do it every 2 days. I'm gonna turn my skillet up to a 7, which is like a medium high. I'm gonna put my bacon in. I'm gonna flip mine and give my knife a little wash. There we go. Okay. And
Oh, you got asked if you had a good Valentine's Day. Kind of crazy with kids.
It was crazy. So apparently, I swear, our kids' school system doesn't believe in ever having our kids go to school. It feels like it. But they're enjoying their mid-winter break because it's too hard to wait from winter break to spring break in 3 weeks. So they have a 4-day weekend. So we had all of our kiddos home today. My oldest did leave to go on a trip with her friends to Ohio for the weekend. But so far it was a good, crazy day. My kids woke up. I always do big Valentine's Day surprises for them. They have like plastic candy hearts that are actually over here. They wake up and they're filled with all of their favorite candies that are, of course, pink and red themed. And then they each got a little gift. It's just something I like to surprise them with. I also do it for like St. Patrick's Day. They get little green cauldrons with rainbow themed gifts for that. But just, it makes it fun. And then my husband got me some lovely flowers over there, as well as my gift. I get to go on a kind of a girls trip at the end of March. So it's kind of a delayed gift, but I'm very excited to get to go to Miami. So I'm excited for that. Okay.
Oh, you got asked about the red velvet cupcakes.
Oh yes, the red velvet, they're delicious. As you can see, we only have 4 left. I'll grab one real quick to show you. I frosted them, and these were the red velvet cupcakes we made earlier with our sourdough discard, and then a lovely almond frosting. It's been so good. They've been disappearing really fast around here. We have enough for us to split for dessert. We won't all get to eat it all for dessert. Right now I'm just peeling up, doing just a quick peel on my potatoes, just because my kids like it better when there is no skin on it, but I'm not perfecting my peel like I would with a mashed potato. I'm fine with a little bit of peel on it, just enough to minimize the amount of peel. You could keep them on there, because then I'm just going to chop them up and we'll fry them in the bacon grease with some onions and peppers and some garlic. So not a perfect peel, but enough that gets most of the skins off for them. I don't mind the skins. I like the skin, but I think I'm alone in that in my family.
Question, is that for fried potatoes?
Yes, it's going to be like a country fried potato. Sometimes they're called like a potato O'Brien's, but I'm just going to fry them up in the bacon with onions, peppers, garlic, and some seasoning. And they're going to be our side with our steaks. Okay, so I've got these with a quick peel on. I'm going to give my bacon a little toss. Break them up. There we go. And I used a ½ pound of bacon. And then I'm going to season my strips so they wake. So for seasoning my steak, I just use a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, or Worcestershire, and garlic salt. Super simple, but it adds great flavor. And then we're gonna make an herby butter to go on it as well. But the Worcestershire, I can't say that one, the acidity in it helps make it really tender, because it helps kind of with the fat in it and softening it up. And it adds a great flavor to it. And we're doing, New York strips are my husband's favorite cut, so we're doing those tonight. And then we're gonna flip and season the other side as well. Most of the time, I like to throw these on the grill. I love a good grilled steak, but it's kind of like cold and rainy outside, so I'm just gonna stay in for the night. There we go. But what I do is I sear them off in my pan, and then I pop them in the oven to finish cooking them so they don't get overcooked or tough. Give this a good stir. And then I'm going to go wash my fingers real quick that I used to turn the steaks. Okay. Great. Always an steaky in here. Okay. Let's chop up our onion. I'm using about 1/3 of an onion. I had it left over. And you don't need a whole lot of onion for this. And I'm going to do it in kind of a small dice for it. But this is just going to add a nice flavor to the potatoes. It kind of reminds me of skillet potatoes. Like if you ever go to like a breakfast place and they make those skillet breakfasts with how like the peppers and the sausage and onions and things. These fried potatoes are pretty much like that. And then we're going to chop up our peppers. You can use a bell pepper, or I'm just using some 3 small sweet peppers, because we always have sweet peppers on hand here. My 9-year-old daughter just loves to eat them fresh. I always pack them in her lunch. Yesterday for school, since that was their last day before coming home for their midwinter break, I made her a Valentine's Day themed lunch. So I cut red peppers into little hearts, and I cut strawberries into hearts, and then I made her sandwiches in a little heart shape and put in the little heart treats in their lunch for her so that she could have a special lunch. Because as they get older, they don't do fun Valentine's Day parties like they used to. They did allow them to pass out Valentines in 4th grade, but they don't do a fun party anymore. Which I'm always just like, oh, let the kids still be young.
Well, to answer your question, Rosa, yes. We are on YT as well.
Yes. There we we go. I'm gonna give it a good stir. I want these to kind of crisp up nice so they have a nice texture with our thing. So I'm gonna wait until they crisp up nicely, but I'm gonna add a bit of butter in here because I'm using a really big skillet and bacon needs fat to crisp up in it. And since my skillet is much bigger than the fat that's yielding on my bacon, it's not gonna crisp up as nicely. So I'm just gonna put in a little bit of butter to kind of help that process. So about 1.5 tablespoons. Let's turn my heat down and that will help crisp up nicely. If I was using a full pound of bacon, I wouldn't have that problem, but since I'm using a 1/2 pound, I just want a little bit more fat in there to really crisp them up, and then there will also be for the potatoes and the onions. So there we go. I'm gonna slide these over to the side and I'm gonna start chopping up my potatoes into fairly small size cubes. I don't want them too large, otherwise it will take them forever to crisp up nicely in the pan. So I'm just making them into small little cubes, about that big. If you cut them too big, it will be forever before they're softened through and you're more likely to burn them. And if you do them too small, they'll cook up fast, but they could get mushy if you're not timing them right with the rest of your dinner. So, chop these guys up. And perfect. And I'm kind of just cutting each one into fourths, and then I'll turn them on their sides and kind of cut them again into fourths and then chop them down. And the goal is you kind of want to try to get your potatoes to be about even in size, because if they're all over the place in size-wise, you'll have some that won't cook all the way through. And you know what? I think I'm only going to use 3 potatoes, so I will save that potato for another night. These are actually making a lot more. They're pretty big potatoes today. Sometimes when I buy potatoes in the bag, you get great big ones, and then sometimes you get these tiny little ones that are like the worst because they're hard to peel, but they're not good for baking because you can't just wrap them in foil, they're tiny. So these are actually good size ones. Okay, there we go. Our bacon is starting to crisp up nicely now. You can see just by adding a little bit of butter how much more grease we have in there. And that will help it all get a nice crisp up instead of like burning and being like chewy in some places. Perfect. Very nice. So we've got our potatoes. And one thing when I'm frying up my potatoes is I don't season them till the very end, because if you season them early, those seasonings can burn to the bottom of your skillet. So I wait till the very end to throw in my seasonings, which I'll be using garlic salt and some Mrs. Dash's table blend as a little bit of seasoning. Okay, I'm gonna put my bacon kind of out to the sides. I'm gonna throw in some minced garlic. I'm gonna use about maybe a big heaping teaspoon, so it'd be about like 2 cloves. Put that in the middle. And then I'm gonna give it a good stir. And this is gonna give it a very fragrant flavor to the bacon grease that's cooking in there. And now that we have, if you look at them, we've got this nice deep red on our bacon. We're all pretty crisped up. I'm gonna throw in my onions and my peppers now, so that they can kind of saute up a minute before I put my potatoes in. I'm just gonna get most of them, it doesn't have to be exact. And then we give it a quick little stir. And that way, they can let out their flavor and kind of crisp up. Once you add the potatoes in, these aren't gonna cook as well as when they are in the grease by themselves, because potatoes are kind of like sponges and they're gonna absorb everything. So I wanna cook up my onions and my peppers first. Here we go. I turn my skillet up, and then I'm gonna come over to here and we're gonna work on our steak. I'm gonna bring these guys over here. And I need a little bit of oil and a little bit of butter. So I'm gonna first put some oil in my skillet. This is a stand pan, if you've never heard of one. It's like a thinly hammered cast iron skillet. I love it because I don't have to season it as much as I do a cast iron skillet, but it gives me that nice kind of skillet cooking, which will be good for the, I'm just making sure my oil goes all the way around. And then I add a little bit of butter because I like the flavor that the butter, like the milk solids, are going to give on the steak. So I'm just gonna add about, I wanna say, a tablespoon of butter. You don't need much, it's more for the flavor that the milk solids will add. And then I'm gonna wait until my butter has melted and my oil has heated up. You don't wanna put your steaks in the cold oil. You need to wait until they're properly heated up so that you get a good sear on it. Let's check out our onions. Okay, we've got a nice, they're starting to get a little translucent and yellow, which means we're getting into a nice tenderness to them, and they've let out a lot of their flavor. So now I'm gonna throw in my potatoes. And I'm cooking them in a hex-clad pan, which is a non-stick pan, but it doesn't use Teflon. If you've never used the hex-clad and you're looking for a new set of pans, I would recommend. I got these about almost 2 years ago. I have yet to scratch any of them. And they are really easy to clean up. Like, nothing sticks to them. They are, so far, my favorite pans. We're getting little escapees here. So
you got a question on what are you cooking tonight?
Tonight we are cooking, there we go. We are cooking, we have New York strip steaks that we season with garlic, salt, and Worcestershire. We are making a country fried potatoes with bacon, onions, peppers, and potatoes. And then we'll saute up some mushrooms. We put a sourdough in the oven, and we're gonna make an herb butter as well. And then start on our next sourdough loaf. I'm making sure I toss everything in the butter, and then we wanna kind of spread it out. And now you just kind of let it sit and crisp up and cook. There we go. Looks like my butter over here is nice and melted. And we're getting a nice little splatter, which means I can put these steaks in.
Well, you got a question. What temperature do you bake at and how long?
For the sourdough, I have it in the oven right now at 500 in the Dutch oven, and then after 20 minutes I take the lid off and I cook it another 20 minutes at 450. I'm gonna start my steaks in my skillet to sear off both sides, and then I'll pop them in my oven that I have set over here at 350, and I'll have them in there for about, I wanna say 6 or 7 minutes at 350. And the whole goal of the skillet is to add the nice browning and sear, but not to cook it. It's really just to sear it on both sides.
And yeah, the question was about the sourdough. There's a couple people that want to start to bake it.
Yes.
So you have your videos?
Yes, I do have all my videos on our page for the recipe for our sourdough, as well as like the stretch and fold part, and if you want to make a starter. If you are new and you are curious about making sourdough, just realize it will be about 2 weeks before you are going to be eating your first loaf, because The starter takes about a week, give or take a couple days, to get it to the right fermentation process. And and then make the bread is about a 2-day process. Look at that, we got a nice sear on this side. And right now we're just searing off each side. Beautiful. These are pretty thick steaks, so they're gonna need like a hot minute in the oven to kind of cook off. We'll let them sear for about 30 more seconds, and then I'll pop them in my oven that I have set at 350. But while we are waiting, I'm gonna slice up my mushrooms that I have over here. I'm using just white button mushrooms. You could also use baby bellas if you wanted. These were just on sale this week, so I grabbed it. I do love a good sauteed mushroom with some steak. Okay.
Got a question, what kind of steaks?
These are New York strips. Okay, I'm gonna turn my skillet off, and these are gonna go in my oven. And they are simply going to, the oven is gonna allow them to kind of cook through without getting them tough. If you try to cook your steak on the skillet by itself, most of the time you will overcook it because it's really hard to cook the inside of your steak. And I like a good medium rare on my steak, so a lot of times, you know, if you sear it off, you'll either be seared on the outside and raw in the middle, or you'll be really tough on the outside, and then you'll get like a medium rare or whatnot in the middle, but you'll have really made it tough on the outside. So what I do is I just do a pan sear, and then I pop it in the oven for about 6 or 7 minutes. Okay, I hear my oven going off over there. So I'm gonna turn this down. Let's take off our lid and see how our sourdough is doing. Okay. We've got a nice pop. I'll pull it out and let you guys look at it real quick. So now we're gonna cook it for about another 15-20 minutes at 450 degrees. So I'm gonna change my temperature. Oven, bake, 450, and perfect. And then I'm gonna set my timer. I'm gonna start with 15 minutes so I can look at it and make sure it's good. I don't want it to get too dark because I like to use mine for sandwich bread. And if it gets too dark, it's not as good for sandwich toasting up. Now flip these guys. And then, there we go. And I'm gonna flatten them back out so they can saute up. The trick with fried potatoes is you don't want to turn them that much. You want them to really crisp up and cook in the butter or the grease that you're using. If you flip them too much, they'll just never get that nice, good, chewy crust on them that you want. Let me finish chopping up these 3 mushrooms, and then we're gonna saute them. And then we need to prep our loaf for our next sourdough loaf so that we can have that in 2 days and make an herby butter. I'm gonna pull up a sauteed pan for our mushrooms. I'm gonna drizzle a little bit of olive oil in here. I find when I'm cooking vegetables and whatnot, I prefer to cook in olive oil over butter because I find that butter tends to burn.
How many people are you cooking for?
We are cooking for 6 tonight. My oldest daughter is gone on a trip with some friends, so we just have my 4 younger ones and my husband and I. So, a small crew. A lot of times my parents are with us, but they are not with us tonight. They're doing their own Valentine's Day. It's funny. So it's my parents. I call them my parents because my mother's husband, I have known him for 35 years, but I'm 37. But they met for the very first time on Valentine's Day 35 years ago. He actually came to the university where she was working and interviewed for a job there because they were in the same field. And they just happened to be on Valentine's Day when they met for the interview. And they were colleagues for a couple of years before they started dating, but he's pretty much been in my life the whole time and helped raise me, so I consider him my father. But they're celebrating their Valentine's because it has a special meaning for them. They also got engaged on Valentine's Day. I'm just doing a nice mince of parsley here. And I'm going to use some of this in our potatoes and some of it in our herby butter. I'm going to toss our mushrooms over here, sizzling up nicely. I want to brown them until they kind of start to sweat and get a nice flavor. Then I'll add a little bit of garlic salt to have them sweat some more. But I always like to brown them up first before I add any salt. Go. Turn this down just a pinch. And then you want to use a nice fine mince on these because we're going to use it for our herby butter. Okay, now I'm going to get a bowl for our butter. And a spoon. And for this, I'm going to use some minced garlic in here. Just put a little bit in our bowl, about, I want to say half a teaspoon, not much. But before I add my butter in it, I'm going to kind of smash the garlic in the bowl because I want to kind of get the texture a little bit more mushy. If you had a mortar and pestle, you could use that. I do have a mortar and pestle, I just don't want to get it out right now. But you're just kind of going to mush up that garlic and kind of smush it. And now I'm going to add in, it's going to be about a tablespoon of parsley. I'm going to put it in here and I'm going to kind of mush it together and kind of bring out some flavors. I like to do this before I add the butter in, just to kind of, it's a little bit easier to smush it into the bowl when you do it. There we go. And then I'm going to give...
We got a question. Did you go to school for cooking?
I did not go to school for cooking. I did spend a lot of time in school. I have 2 undergrad degrees, a master's degree, and a PhD, or my doctorate. And, but none of them were for cooking. I had just been cooking since I was 13 years old. And so I've just done it for a very long time. And I enjoy reading a lot of cooking magazines and trying out new recipes and experimenting. And it's really, practice takes perfection. So I'm a much better cook than I was 5 years, than I was 5 years before that. You know, you just learn new skills and new tricks of the trade over time. So everybody's going to turn out in the beginning, and they're not going to be a great cook. But don't give up, because what I have learned is you can do everything all the great chefs can do. It just takes you time and practice and being okay with your mistakes. Okay, I'm going to put in half a stick of butter here and a little bit of garlic salt. It's going to be about, I don't know, half a teaspoon of garlic salt. And this is room temperature butter so that it smushes up. You don't want to use melted butter because then it won't solidify, and cold butter is really hard to mash. So room temperature butter, and we're just going to smash it and incorporate all of these herbs. And this, what we'll do is you just spoon a little bit over the tops of our steak, and it will just give you a nice little fresh burst of flavor. And speaking of which, Let's take a little look at our steaks right now that we have sizzling. I'm gonna pull them out of the oven up here, and I'm gonna do my little finger touch that tells me about whether they are at, like medium rare, rare, whatnot. Okay, so the trick is, if you can push down like this is still rare. So if anything feels like your cheek on your face, that's rare. And then your nose is medium rare, your chin is medium, and your forehead is like well done. So that's the different feelings. So if your steak feels like your cheek feels, it's rare. If it feels like your nose, it's medium rare. Right now, all of my steaks are medium rare. They've got a good push in them. So I'm gonna pop them back in, but I do check often. And I'm just gonna give them a quick flip so that the nice seasoned part, the flavors on the bottom of the pan, can coat the other side as well. You see how they have that lovely golden color? Those are all the steak drippings. So I'm gonna pop these back in, and then we'll check them in a little bit. But always use your face guide. That's what I have learned with grilling, and I've always have good, they always come out perfect, because it really does, what your cheek is rare, it really works. Okay, let's stir up these mushrooms. Beautiful. Get a nice crisp on it, and now I'm gonna continue mashing up this herby butter, and then we'll flip our potatoes in just a second. But you see how it's coming together in a very nice and incorporated way. And this just will have a lovely flavor added on. Kind of gives you a little bit more of a gourmet twist on your steak. And the heat of your steak will melt it on, like over it. And it's a nice little thing to dip in. Okay, let's flip these potatoes, and then we'll work on our loaf of bread. Good, look at this lovely crust we're getting on these potatoes. That's like just the way you want them. These in here. Okay. I'm gonna stir my mushrooms, and then I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of garlic salt on them. Not too much, because I don't want it to burn on the pan, but just a little to help them bring out a little bit more of their juices. Salt helps them, I guess, dehydrate. So I'm just gonna sprinkle it. I'm not gonna stir it in yet. I'm gonna turn my temperature down. We've got this, we've got steaks. Let's work on our next loaf of sourdough, because I always like to keep one going. Let me clear off my space over here. We've got my scale. I get a big bowl, my dough whisk. I fed my starter after we made our sourdough red velvet cupcakes. I fed my starter so that it would be nice and bubbly for our sourdough. You need to make sure you feed your sourdough 6 to 8 hours before you're ready to make bread. Otherwise, it will be a dense, doughy mud. And now, some bread flour. Okay, we are going to add into our bowl 100 grams of sourdough starter that has been fed within the last 6 hours. If you can see in here, it's very bubbly. That means it's alive and active, which is what you need for my thing. So I'm gonna give it, let me get my, there we go, a little stir. And then we're gonna pour it in here, and I need 100 grams.
You have a question, what are you making?
This is going to be a new loaf of sourdough bread. Perfect, 100 grams exactly. I always love it when I get it perfect. And then I have warm water over here. You need to add 375 grams of warm water. Warm water works so much better to incorporate with your flour than cold water. And we want 375 grams, which is about 1.5 cups. I really like to use grams in a scale, because it is much more accurate than using, the cup measurement.
You have a question, do you sell the bread?
I do not sell the bread.
it doesn't really make it more than 2 days.
Yeah, I don't make enough to do it, and I'm really busy with my family to even consider doing it. I have 5 kids, and we've got active in sports, and we are just crazy busy here. And then I also I write. I have a couple of books on Amazon. If you are into romance or fantasy, or kind of like a sci-fi fantasy, I think my romance novels are The Graduate Student. I'm about to put up the second one. And then I have a fantasy novel called, the first one is The Forgotten King. And then the second one is, I'm blanking on the name of it right now. What is it again, Jake? Oh, yeah. Well, for some reason my head is blanking, but they're my Crowns of Eternity series, and it is on there. I do enjoy writing, and then I do consulting. So I really don't have time to bake a bunch of breads for other people. Okay, now we are going to add 500 grams of bread flour. I'm going to get a bowl. Let's see. I'm going to tar that out so it's at 0. And then 500 grams of bread flour. You want bread flour? This is going to be about 3 cups, give or take or some. So 1, 2, 500, perfect. Let me toss these potatoes real quick. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a little bit of salt in. There we go, we're getting a nice crust on these. And let me stir my mushrooms. Beautiful. Okay, and then my steak are gonna be done. So I'm gonna just pop them out and look at them, and then we'll stir. You always wanna let your steak sit before you serve it, because it will allow the juices to go in there. If you cut it up, it will get like all the juices and natural flavors will run out. Okay, we're going to add, so our bread over here, we're gonna add about 2 teaspoons of salt, which is about 8 or 9 grams. And we are going to, I'm gonna use my dough whisk. This thing is a lifesaver, it's better than a spoon. We are just going to whisk in the flour. And I'm using unbleached bread flour. You want to use unbleached because that has the active organisms in it that is needed for the fermentation process for sourdough. And then I'm just going to whisk it in. Sourdough is going to be more sticky than you realize.
Got a question, how many grams of water?
375 grams of water. Ooh, and our sourdough is just about ready to come out. Look at this, everything is coming together. So,
and the dough you're making now is the same as?
It is the exact same as the one we're pulling out of the oven. It's my favorite recipe. It's so simple and so easy. Okay, so we have it really incorporated. Yes, it looks sticky, but we are going to be kneading this every 30 minutes for the next 2 hours. Since it's sticky, all you do is put a little, we're gonna take our bread out. All you're gonna do is put a little bit of flour on your hands and dust a little bit over the top. And let me grab my oven mitts. And then you just knead it. It will be sticky. Don't be afraid of that. Oh, beautiful. We've got a perfect little crust color on here. Whoop. Let me turn my oven off. There we go. So you bake it for 20 minutes at 500 with the lid on, and then you take the lid off and you bake it for another 20 minutes at 450. And now you can see we have this perfect, but you can't really see my hearts that I cut into it. But now we are almost done. So now I'm gonna turn this heat up. We're gonna flip this real quick. Beautiful. And now we just got to finish off our potatoes. We're going to add in some Mrs. Dash's, which is a salt-free seasoning blend. I just like it because it has like oregano, marjoram, pepper, onion, celery, salt. It's going to be about a teaspoon, but you're going to just do a nice dusting. We're going to get our salt from the bacon and, of course, a little bit of garlic salt. I love garlic salt. We're going to shake it over, and then I'm going to put in some of our parsley, and we're going to give it a good stir. And they're just lovely, simple country fried potato. They've also been called potato Bryans. But let's serve up a plate, and I'll show you how I will be eating my dinner tonight. I'm gonna turn off my skillet and grab a plate. Okay, this guy looks nice and beautiful. And I'll do my little touch so you can see it. It has just a little bit of give, which is a perfect. And then I'm gonna put, I love mushrooms, so I'm like the one who I love it. So I've got my mushrooms here. We're gonna do a nice scoop of the potatoes. And then we have our herby butter. And you just need to put a little bit on ours, and it's gonna melt over it. And then let me pull out my loaf of bread right here and show it to you guys. And we'll cut off a nice slice. It's gonna be a bit hot, no worries. Look at that guy. Is he not beautiful? Perfect all the way around. And I'm gonna just pull my sleeve down because he's a little bit hot. And look at the beautiful bubbles in that sourdough. Isn't it perfect? Well, this is our Valentine's dinner for tonight. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We love it that you come and join us. We love all your comments and everything. Feel free to message us if you have any recipe requests. But again, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we try to do live shows every day. Thanks again for joining us.